Hello and welcome to the next instalment in the Southern Highlands ride. Just on the film on the screen at the moment, I think I've just crossed Narambulla Creek, which is about 15 kilometres from Goulburn. I'm on the Highway and I'm heading north towards Meruland. Once I pass Meruland, I'm going to take the Highlands Way turn off and follow that road along. So when I get there, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the towns and villages that I go through, and when I get a bit closer to Meruland, I'll tell you a little bit more about Meruland. What I thought I'd do in this video is talk about something that's been on my mind for a while and plaguing me for a while, and just express my thoughts about it. So across the road from where I live is a large park. If you know Goulburn, it's called Victoria Park, and for those who don't know Goulburn, it's a very large park. Its perimeter is about 2 kilometres, and it's almost the recreational hub of the town. Over the last 4 or 5 years, the council has spent millions, and I mean literally millions of dollars, on installing things in the park to make it a place where children and adults can come and play, have picnics, parties, and enjoy themselves. To give you an example, there are 2 cricket ovals. One of the cricket ovals, the larger one, Seaford Oval, has just had a new pavilion built. It cost $400,000. Now, when I tell you the prices of these things, I'm not complaining about the cost. I'm simply telling you them to put a bit of perspective on what I'm talking about. At the same time, they also upgraded the lighting by putting in 4 floodlighting towers, which means that the cyclists who use it for their spring and summer events on the track there have better lighting, and also it's possible to have night cricket. An adventure playground was installed in the park, and that cost close to $2 million. It has all sorts of things that encourage children to be creative, to be active, to be physical, and to problem solve. As well as that, there were security lighting and security cameras installed to prevent vandalism. A rage cage, which is a large steel structure built on a cement slab, was built as well. It has basketball and netball rings. It has some cricket stumps, and it has some goals for mini soccer. Stage 1 of the Japanese garden has been completed. That's a 3-stage project which I suspect will cost several $100,000. At the moment, the council's in the process of upgrading the aquatic centre, and that's just on the edge of the park. That's going to come out at about $30 million. But one of the other big projects in the park was the skate park, which was built over 2 stages. The first stage was built several years ago and cost about $300,000. The second stage, which was an upgrade and made for more surfaces for flat skating and scooters and that kind of things, cost $500,000. Now, as I said, I'm not suggesting it's not value for money or money well spent, because things that get children out of their houses and away from their screens and being physically active are good. Things that encourage parents to take their children out of their house and enjoy the outdoors are also good. So that's money well spent. As part of the $500,000 upgrade of the park, there were some tree plantings, native plants, and there were also some street furniture installed. Now, within about a week of the park opening, all the native plants were removed. Somebody just pulled them up, and they were strewn all over the place. The council came along and rightly took the attitude that if they replanted them, they'd die, and if they replaced them, it'd only happen again. So they just put up all the plants, took all the plants and left them. As part of that, another part of it was that they installed some street furniture. Now, at one end of the park, they put a gabled roof shelter with benches, a table, and 2 low table things that allowed people to sort of sit there and watch the skating and watch other people doing their things, and there was a place where people could put their stuff. At the end, backing onto the pool, they put a flat-roofed shelter with a table and benches either side of it. That all sounds good and well and fine, and when people came there, they had places to sit. They could eat their lunch if they wanted to, and people who didn't want to participate in the skating or whatever could just sit and watch. And that was all well and good. Now I'm just going to interrupt all of that and say we're coming up to Meruland now. Meruland is a small township or village just north of Goulburn, about 30 kilometres north of Goulburn. It used to be famous as the truck stop, but I think that many of the things that were required of the truckies are now done via technology or those point-to-point cameras. Often the trucks pull in there and go over the weighbridge and then go back onto the highway. So as a result of the bypass, there have been some housing developments there. There's a small shopping centre and there's a cafe and a pub, and it's kind of a bit of a booming place. People are happy to live there because the land is cheaper and houses are cheaper, and they either commute into Goulburn or or they may even travel to Mossvale or Bowral to work. I think it's a bit of a thriving community at the moment. There's a school there. I'm not sure how many teachers are in the school, but it's a bit of a thriving community. So that's Meruland for you. Now, getting back to talking about the skate park and the furniture and so on. After the plants were removed, somebody, I'm not saying who, and I don't have any idea, I have no idea, so I'm not making any accusations to say that it was children or teenagers, or I'm just saying somebody, began to remove the nuts and bolts that held on the planks that make up the seating part of the benches and the table. Now I'm saying that they began to remove them because the bolts were held in with nuts. They couldn't just fall out, they had to be physically removed. So somebody came along with their spanners and decided to take these nuts and bolts out. And they progressively took the nuts and bolts out and threw them away until the point where there were none holding one of the planks down that made up the seating, the part you actually sat on, of the bench. Then they took the plank off the metal brackets that were the frame of it. Now the council rightly recognised that this was a bit of a hazard, a safety hazard, and somebody could get hurt. So they sent workmen up, and the workmen ground off the steel frame that made the support for this bench, ground everything down to level with the concrete so no one can have an accident, and that was the end of that bench. I'll just interrupt again. I'm about to turn on to the Highland Way, so it's about a kilometre north of Meruland. Turning right and going on to the Highland Way, which is a tourist route that takes you from here, on the Hume Highway here, through to Bundanoon. This is the first section of it. And you'll see the sign there, a sign here advising you of some of the towns that you go through, and also advising of the hazard of the railway bridge, which is about 3 kilometres ahead. So getting back to the furniture, not long after that, perhaps the same people, some other people, and again I'm not making any accusations, I don't know who did this, I just know that it happened, began to remove the bolts that held down the planks that made up the table. Now after a while all the bolts were gone and one of the planks was then removed, so that now the brackets that made up the table, the frame of the table were exposed, and again the council took the view that this was a safety hazard and someone might get hurt and they might face legal problems, so they took the table away. They sent somebody along, cut all the steel off, ground all the nuts and bolts and everything down to the ground level, and the table is no more. So now we're down to one bench, and I notice now that some of the bolts are being removed from the remaining bench. Now, some people might listen to all that and say, so what? It's a skate park. What do you need what do you need furniture for? What do you need plantings for? Well, consider this. There are many children who go there to skate, to scooter and rollerblade and all that sort of stuff. Some of them go with their parents and some go with their grandparents. The parents and grandparents don't necessarily want to rollerblade or skateboard or anything like that, but they do want somewhere to sit while they're watching their children or their grandchildren do the things they're doing. Eventually, if this other bench goes, there'll be no seats. There'll be no places to sit where there are tables and chairs and so on, and grandparents and parents who normally would have taken their children to the skate park will take the view that there's nowhere for me to sit, I don't want to go there anymore, I don't want to take you there anymore. So, two things happen. One is that the grandparents and parents don't go, but the bigger problem is the children who are meant to enjoy that area no longer are able to do so because their parents or grandparents won't take them. So there's this thing an intangible thing that I call the amenity of their place. The amenity is there's the physical thing itself. Then there are all the things that add to it that make it a place that people want to go to. If there's water, if there's toilets, if there's shade, if there's places to sit. And when those things are damaged or gone, then the amenity of the place is diminished. Now, all of this is important because this is a public space. It's a space that belongs to everybody. It doesn't belong to one particular group. Yes, the skateboarders and the rollerbladers and so on, it's meant for them, but it's also meant for other people who just want to come and watch, or for people who are supervising their children or grandchildren, as I said. And when that amenity is diminished, then there are consequences for everybody. That is, the people who want to use that area can now not get the same level of enjoyment out of it, so they stop going. Just interrupting again, coming up to that very sharp turn on the road here. It was advertised about 3 kilometres back. There's a bridge here, or a viaduct, which is the railway line, and you can see there's a sharp turn here. The signs further back warn of low height because there have been occasions when caravanners and so on have gone through there and damaged their air conditioning and so on. Just around this bend, we're coming up to the small village, I guess, of Tallong. Some people say Tallong, but I think the locals call it Tallong. Tallong, there's a school, there's a railway station, there are houses, and there's a local pizza place, cafe thing. Tallong is famous for its apple festival, which is held around the long weekend in October. Many towns and villages have their spring festival then. For example, Goulburn has its Lilac Time festival. I know Grafton has the Jacaranda festival and so on. Lots of places have a festival of some sort around that time. And Tallong has its apple festival. All right, so getting back to the furniture in the skate park and so on. Some people might listen to what I've just said and say, well, vandalism's a thing that happens everywhere. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just a thing. Things get broken. Vandalism is everywhere. We just have to learn to live with it. And I'm trying to suggest that all of us, especially those who are adults and those who have had children, have a way of breaking that cycle. And we are all responsible for doing that. I say that we have a way of doing that by saying from the very earliest times we can, we take our children to public spaces like parks and playgrounds and so on, that we emphasise to them that it is a space where everybody comes, where everybody gets to play, where everybody gets to enjoy themselves. And if you damage something, then somebody else's enjoyment of it is diminished, and nobody has a right to do that. So simple things like taking turns and letting other people use the swing or the slide or the flying fox or whatever it is, that's what people normally do. That's what adults normally do. They tell their children to enjoy themselves and say, let somebody else have a go or take a turn. We expect children to play with that equipment robustly, and we expect the equipment to be strong enough to withstand the sort of play that most children would engage in. We don't expect children to deliberately damage that equipment. And I don't suggest that any parent says to their child, why don't you go out and smash something or break something or damage the furniture at the skate park or something like that. But each of us can, by saying to our children from the very earliest age when we go there, this is a place for everybody to enjoy. This is a place for everyone to come. When you're there, you enjoy it, you use it properly and you enjoy it, but you make sure that you leave it the way you found it. So that means simple things like putting your rubbish in the bin. If the bin's full, perhaps you have to take your rubbish home with you. It means sharing the equipment, sharing the play space with everybody else. And it means making sure that you are doing your best not to deliberately damage things. Now, whenever there's a situation like this, somebody talking about something like this, there's always a call for the schools to do something about it. And people say, well, schools should teach something about this. Schools should teach kids not to do this. And I agree with that to a certain extent. As a former school teacher, I agree that schools have a role to play in all of these things. But I say two things. One, if we start teaching about this thing, what is it will we not be teaching? Because there's only so many hours in our school day. And if we do this one, there's something else we're not going to be able to do. Secondly, schools can only play a part. They can't do everything. And if parents and the community in general is not behind a particular thing and saying, this is not acceptable, we don't want this to happen, we want to do something about it, then all the talking by the teachers and all the work by the schools will have no effect. So it must be a thing that the community engages in. It must be a thing that parents take a stand on. It must be a thing that parents say from the beginning and from the very earliest times that they take their children to public places, that this is a public space. Everybody gets to enjoy it. You leave it the way you found it. You look after it, you enjoy it, you make sure it's not being damaged. And if you see people damaging things, then you've got to speak up about it and say something about it. Now, if I became aware of the people who had done this damage, what I would want to happen is I wouldn't want them to be taken to the police station and be given a criminal record, because I wouldn't want someone's life to be ruined by something foolish they did when they were 13 or 14. That's assuming it was teenagers and not adults. But I would want them to understand that the enjoyment of that facility is diminished for the people there when the things that have been damaged have been damaged. People can enjoy it less because there's less there to enjoy. And what I'd like them to understand is that they've contributed to that lesser enjoyment, but also I would like them to make the repair. I would like them to repair the damage they made. And to do that, I would like somebody like the Men's Shed, which I know often does things like that, take people under their wing and say to them, this is how you fix what you've done. This is what you have to do to fix it, and show them the skills and the time and the equipment that's needed to make the repairs that need to be made. Ideally, we wouldn't have these things happen. Ideally, we'd have public spaces that everybody respected, but the fact is we have this vandalism. All right, well, I've said what I wanted to say about it. I hope I've made my point. I hope I haven't come across as too preachy to anybody. I apologise if I have. It's just something that's been on my mind for a while, and I figure it's best to talk about it. We're coming to the end of this section of the video. I hope you enjoyed the ride from the creek to past Tallong, and I will talk to you in the next video.